Yes, much of my work now is, especially in the last 3 to 4 years, has been in deprogramming people because, as I may have mentioned on your show last time, the entire world now is subjected to mind control and programming, which is being broadcast from satellites that ring the Earth and are amplified by ground tower transmissions like cell towers, microwave towers, etc. And in many countries, even the electrical systems in the home are conductors for these electrical mind control waves.
Is that I've heard this about the electrical system, that this has to do with something called the Lily wave. Have you heard about that?
Yes, and also people should know that the electrical generating stations very often, in fact, mostly they do, generate more electricity than is necessary, and then that is mixed with the ELF that for mind control, and they actually dump it into the ground, and that travels through the ground into the surrounding area and just permeates homes, businesses, roads. Everything is being bombarded from the ground and from the sky.
And you mentioned a kind of a grid work of satellites. Then I guess, what kind of signal is it that is being broadcast? You mentioned cell towers. I guess that this is something that goes into the microwaves. Is that correct?
Yes, and quite brilliantly, the carrier waves mimic the pattern and intensity of human brainwave, so that the person thinks it's their own thoughts. They are not aware that it's external to them and being transmitted, because it piggybacks the brainwave, the sine wave of your own mind.
And do you know who is putting up and maintaining and are owning the grid of these satellite networks at this time?
Well, you can call it Illuminati, New World Order, global government, whatever term you want to use, but it's the group of quite a lot of individuals who across the globe are maintaining and controlling human population.
So, as we talked about before, and as we have mentioned on this program obviously before, is that this is I guess we could say a tiny clique of very wealthy and powerful individuals. Would you say that that's correct?
Yes, I don't know if I would use the word tiny, but it is in proportion to the global population tiny.
Right.
We're talking about, perhaps 300 to 400,000 people who are attempting to control 6.6 billion.
That's right. So it's a few controlling the many, and in that process, all different of types of technology is something that they would have to use, I guess, in a way to be able to maintain their agenda and maintain their control. Is that right?
Yes, and it's very pervasive, because when you're such a small group of people and you have a mind to control the rest, armies and weapons really aren't enough, because the other 6.2 billion can overwhelm that 0.4 amount very quickly. So the use of mind control is a way of creating slaves who don't know that they're slaves. And then this is enhanced and supported by media, by television broadcasts and shows that use trigger words and codes in them that will enhance the programming. News stories are only designated to what the population is supposed to know, not the entire amount of information. And the other thing is with the food, medication, the movies that are out there, most food has been genetically altered. And interestingly, people go to the store and they look for perhaps the brands that say non-GMO or not genetically altered. But the law, especially in the United States, and I can't tell you what it is in Europe and other countries, but in the U.S., if a product has not been altered within 5 years, then they can say that it is non-GMO, even though 6 or 7 years ago it was altered.
Really?
See? Yeah, and so people are fooled. And even now, the organic stores in organic section and they buy their food, but the law states that 37% of it can be non-organic and still have an organic label. So people are fooled by all of this. And in the medicinal products that come out, they contain lead, aluminum, barium, arsenic, all kinds of poisons in the preservatives and in the medications, which then bind the heavy metals to the cellular structure, and in fact create little implants, and your body becomes like an antenna.
So, okay, and would you say that that's the main purpose? I mean, many people have talked about the fact, okay, granted that it's a multifaceted agenda, of course. If you can achieve two goals in one blow, so to speak, that I guess that would be optimum from their point of view. But many people have talked about generally keeping people on a kind of a bad health that keeps them kind of susceptible to various ailments and so forth. But what you're saying here is that there's another kind of a side agenda as well going on then with the bad food and all that.
Well, absolutely, and you're correct that by producing food which really has no nutritional value, what I call plastic food, it keeps people weak, and it makes them sick, and then they need medication to maintain their health, and then the medication makes them sick, and then they need surgeries, and it's an ongoing process for their entire life for as long as they live, and that's a big money maker to pharmaceutical companies and to government agencies. And then beyond all that, when a person's body is weak and does not have the nutrients that it needs, it is more susceptible of mind control and programming.
Interesting. And this is, this reminds me very much of the program that is incoming called Codex Alimentarius. Have you heard about this?
Yeah. This is a terrible thing because, and this is already evident in Australia and a lot of it also in Europe, and many places in Europe, where you cannot even get a vitamin without a prescription. And then the dosage that you are allowed to have is absolutely useless. So in effect, they have taken away the choice of the population to have alternative care. And the food now in the world is so depleted. Even the real organic food is just depleted because we're on a planet that's depleted. And the supplements themselves are also depleted. So we need a combination of the organic food, the supplements, and using our minds in order to really get what we need.
Do you think that this is because of the nutrients in the top soil, the top level of the soil is basically eroded or disappearing at this point?
Yes, that is a factor in many areas, but as you may have heard, especially in North America, the governments are only allowing genetically altered seeds to be used by the farmers, and the original seeds are no longer available. They're useless. And in order for the government to make sure that only these genetically altered seeds are used, they radionically bombard the farmlands so that the original seeds cannot grow.
And regarding Codex, I know that this was supposed to go in at the end of 2009, I think, December 21st or something like that. In 2009, it's going to be implemented, but they've kind of snuck to it and started in advance, so to speak. It was an article just a few days ago on Yahoo that claims that they've already come to the international standard for what is considered to be a tomato. I don't know if you heard that, but apparently they've jumped ahead of themselves. And although this hasn't been, verified, so to speak, in all countries, they've started to bring it in already. So they just kind of they're doing it the same old way. They're just ramming it down our throats, basically.
Yeah, and even in Australia, and whenever I did my seminars or consultations in Australia, and I would recommend certain herbs or vitamins, they just could not get them. And in Germany and in other countries where I had worked, when these people ordered in the supplements, they were called to the post office and asked to explain what these things were, and they were confiscated. So yes, it's really already begun.
it's I think the important kind of a remedy towards an obvious thing like this with codex and all of that is, of course, to learn to grow a little bit of your own food. Isn't that a good idea at this point, Stewart? Wouldn't you say?
Yes, yes. Of course, it is a good idea. But let's remember that even if you were to set up on your own land, your own organic garden, the rain is still toxic. You know, the soil will still have toxins in it, so it still will not be totally organic. So it's always going to be an issue until things change.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, a thing like that, to me, it sounds like almost. It sounds to me like the planet needs a kind of go through a healing process. I'm reminded of the fact that continuous, not maybe cataclysm. That's maybe too dramatic, but once in a while, when there are kind of large environmental upheavals on the planet, we find that new levels of topsoil are reintroduced into the environment. The Earth kind of seems to be healing itself in a way when these kind of catastrophes take place, and it sounds to me like something like that needs to happen here in order to us, for everything to reboot, so to speak, again. Would you agree on that, Stewart?
Yeah, and that is happening because we're seeing all of these volcanoes now erupting, and of course, when a large volcano erupts, it sends out billions of cubic meters of ash and rock into the atmosphere that eventually fall to the ground.
Yeah.
And of course, earthquakes cause land to shift up and overturn. So yes, the Earth is going through a process of trying to clear itself out. However, the Illuminati or the New World Order, whatever you want to call it, is aware of this as well. And so they are artificially trying to change that. And so there's this clash going on between the artificial weather changes and what the Earth is trying to do naturally. And so we're seeing conflicts and disasters in many locations where these energies are clashing. And so this is also a problem.
It sounds to me like we're in a lot of trouble here,
Well, yes, we are in a lot of trouble, and as for those who read my website, I say constantly, there is no global warming. In fact, the opposite is true. The Earth is getting colder, and in fact, less sunlight is reaching the Earth than ever before, because naturally, the Earth is slowly moving further out away in its orbit from the sun, and so there's less light reaching the Earth, and also the volcanoes and other incidences that have occurred have caused more of a haze to be put around the Earth so that there's less light getting through. So it's getting colder. That's why we had snow in Buenos Aires and Cape Town and Phoenix and Malibu, California, all had snow. That's not global warming. Antarctica recorded the coldest temperatures ever and the deepest snow and ice ever. So, the government goes to these little places where there are undersea volcanoes, where they're erupting and causing the ice in those areas to melt, and they're saying, look, it's the caps are melting, it's global warming.
Right.
But it was a volcano erupting beneath the ice. That's what caused it to melt.
Of course, and there's, to begin with, we don't know all of these places, of course, but as you say, there are so many of these things happening, and these might be going in cycles too, and I've heard that there is a lot of volcanoes going off right now around the planet, and this has been kind of ongoing, I guess, for a few years now, but definitely, as you say, under ice volcanoes is a big issue like this. And also, of course, the whole global warming issue can be kind of skewed in this manner because, very much CO2 obviously are released when a volcano blows. I can't remember the exact figures now, but someone were actually comparing the amount of CO2 that we put out through cars, industry, etc., and compared to a volcano. And this was like, what we put out is like a fraction, is minute of what a volcano puts out,
Exactly. Humankind, although it has many issues, is not responsible for the changes in the atmospheric conditions. You're correct that the pollution, the factories, the emissions from vehicles is a minute compared to what the natural changes are that are occurring. And a couple of weeks ago I flew over Greenland, and Greenland is covered in snow and ice. I looked, and here it is. It was the end of June, and it looked like winter time. And yet, just before I left, they said, "Oh, Greenland is melting. Everything is exposed." It's not true, because they think, how many people are going to go to Greenland and look?
Right, exactly.
Not many.
Exactly.
But it's basically a lie. And the most comical thing that I read, which was about the middle of June, and it said that the ice in the northern seas is starting to melt. Well, it's summertime. Of course it's going to melt.
Yeah.
It always melts. And people look at that and they go, oh, my goodness, And so then the price of gasoline goes up dramatically and everything goes up. And nobody says, why. It's absolutely no reason at all for the price of fuel to be where it is now. Absolutely none.
Exactly. No, I agree. It's all skewed, and even the the CEOs of Shell, Royal Dutch Shell, what have you, goes out and talks about the fact that this is all speculation. We made the record profits. It's it's incredible.
He should be asked, why he has $50 million bonus.
Right. Well, exactly. No, it's ludicrous, and you're right. I mean, there's all these kind of issues, but in the end, especially in the latter, at least, kind of issues we touched upon here, I think that this is good in one way for if you will, the kind of the awakening of humanity, because unfortunately a lot of people need to kind of be pushed into the corner, if you will, in order to actually wake up, and I see that this is a catalyst for that. That's how I feel.
Well, I am hoping that you are correct, because I see a lot of people, especially in Europe and North America, where they just go blindly, whatever they're told in the newspaper and then CNN, and they say that they just think, well, that's the way it is and we have to suffer. And they just don't consider making a change for the better. They make a change for the worse. And
Right.
this is disturbing to me. However, I agree that at some point, human beings will be pushed to such a degree, they will say, hey, they'll push back.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm waiting for.
Me too. Okay, let's see here. Let's backtrack a little bit and get back on the track, as it were, here, and talk a little bit more about colors and archetypes. As I understand it, colors can be used as triggers in some circumstances, but it also can be related to actually treat mind control. It can be a healing thing, isn't that right, Stewart?
Yes, and let me preface it all by stating that I do teach the language of hyperspace, which is what I describe the way God mind thinks and creates. It's a triad of color, tone, and archetype symbol. And it's a triad that creates all that exists in every dimension, in every universe. And so it's a natural undercurrent of creation. And as all things, can be used for positive or negative, and so the powers that be can take sequences of colors and symbols and use them in a way that's not so good for people. But if human beings understand the language of hyperspace and how the proper meanings of the colors and symbols, they can then create their own reality in the way they desire, which is the way it should be anyway.
So that means that all of the horrible things that we began to talk about are things that necessarily don't have to be a part of your life. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. That is absolutely correct. When you see a terrible accident occur and then so many people perish, but one person survives without a scratch, why did that person survive? Because they didn't have the mind pattern for disaster. So it doesn't matter where you are, and it doesn't matter what you do or what nationality you are. if you learn how to use your own mind and create the good things in life, you will experience that no matter what else is going on.
So that means that the nature of reality is a tad bit different than we are being told, then, I guess, right?
Well, you know what scientists say about reality is, of course, skewered to a control system. They don't want people to know they can use their minds to create their own reality. That's very scary to the controllers, because that takes away the programming.
Right, right.
You know, so yes, every human beings, unfortunately, and I'm sure I must have mentioned on the show last time, use only 10% or less of their total capacity of their mind,
so they
and
say, yeah.
3% or less of their DNA capacity. So can you imagine how inefficient and blocked that is?
Yeah.
And how amazing it would be to open even a percentage more of what you're using.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. Not about the DNA there, but I guess you're referring to what they term as junk DNA, right? That is a whole portion of the human DNA that actually is unused, and that's totally bollocks in my book, at least,
Yes, and that's how they control people, by using words like junk. So some student is going to school and learning about genetics, and they're told 97% is junk.
Yeah.
And that's what they learn in school officially. Then this child grows up and believes that the 90% of themselves is junk.
Right.
You see?
Exactly.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
And when really, if I may just say this, if you study genetics, you learn that an amoeba, an elephant, a human being, an alien, whatever it is, 97% of that DNA is identical. That's amazing. So only 3% differentiate species and individuals within a species. So to me, my opinion is that since 97% of DNA is identical universally, that is a proof to me of a God mind, or an originator of all things.
Yeah, a designer.
Yeah.
And so in a way we can perhaps go into the direction that DNA is possibly I don't know if we should say code or an encoder, something that actually interprets the originator's original idea, as it were, and the DNA is something that kind of encapsulates or draws to it the spirit. Would you say that that's a correct assessment?
Yes, and I teach this in my DNA seminar, and I show a very simple flow chart. If you go and understand that all that exists is mind, energy, and thought, that's all that exists, and this is electromagnetic. As this enters into a physical reality, the electromagnetic energy attracts atomic structure. And the atomic structure forms around the patterns of that mind or thought to create protein bases, and the protein bases then become the foundation of your DNA, which is the blueprint of your body.
Right.
So literally, what you think is what you become physically, and then your mind pattern projects out into the screen of physical reality to reflect back everything that you think. So you are living in a holographic universe.
Yes.
And you can create everything that you wish.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, humanity as a species has a victimization mind pattern. And so they create oppressors and tyrants. So this is what must be eliminated, is the mind pattern of victimization.
And I mean, would you say that this is happening then on the mass level, that this is something that the mass are contributing to? Because again, this is kind of, if you think about it in a way, for me, it becomes a little bit schizophrenic, because we're told that on one level this is an individual reality, if you will, we can live wherever we want to be, but then on the other side of this, it feels like we all are contributing to this objective picture that is shaping reality into the horrible scenario that we have in front of us right now. So I mean, how does these two different ideas or pictures collaborate with each other, or do they in any way?
Well, yes, it's really the same thing because we create our own little world, and that is a part of the macrocosm. So everything we experience, both personally and globally, we have contributed. We have created this, and we must take responsibility. That is the most difficult thing for people, is to accept responsibility and say, yes, part of me is projecting these events in Central Asia. Part of me is projecting the programming and the mind control because I have victimization mentality. When we accept that we, both individually and collectively as a species, are responsible for everything that we experience, personally and globally, then we can start to change it.
Yeah.
But if we constantly act as a victim, that this is external to us and we have no control over it, then we are lost.
Right. So it also means that we shouldn't hide away from horrible and terrible things, but we need to change our approach to it. Is that right?
Exactly.
We need to change our way, our thoughts, or because I guess in a way then what you're saying here as well is that it's because of our the powerful nature of the human mind that they can maintain a reality picture as long as everyone has the similar thought patterns or similar mindset about world events. Would you say that's correct?
Yes, and that is why the news services are so coordinated. I mean, everywhere you go, it's the same BBC, CNN, it's the same over and over.
Yeah.
And the same news. And so everybody must know the same and understand the same with no deviation.
Right.
And that's why there is this acceptance of what is going on. There was, after 9/11 in Europe, especially in France, a realization that it was staged event, that it was manufactured, that it was actually the government of the U.S. that has created this. And then what happened? This big furor occurred, and they were made to apologize and retract these terrible anti-American statements. And then Bush says, well, either you're with me or you're against me. So there was no in-between. It was only extremes.
Yeah.
If you didn't agree, then you were a terrorist.
Of course, yeah.
Yes. And so the whole world acquiesced to this really programming, mind control.
Indeed, and this is again it's multifaceted because there's another level, of course, to that as well, and that's a kind of the trauma of the situation, because we know now that trauma is a huge part of how to mind control someone. Isn't that right, Stewart?
That's correct. Through trauma, the personality of a person becomes fractured into compartments, and those compartments can then be rewired or reprogrammed into alter personalities, subpersonalities, partial personalities, even what we call constructs of buildings and other things that become part of a new matrix of the mind, which is artificially installed over the pieces of the original one. It's a tremendous science, and they have found geometrically that the shape of this matrix, when fractured to its completeness, forms a cube of 13 by 13 by 13, which means there are 2,197 compartments within a human mind that can be controlled and altered.
Is that similar to that there can be 2,197 personalities then as well?
Theoretically, yes. However, if that were to occur, the human mind could get overloaded, and then, quite honestly, the person can go insane. There can be severe trauma physically that then does not allow the programming to occur. And we see this a lot in prisons and mental institutions, where these people have just been overloaded,
right. Because in a way, the human brain actually works like a patch bay in many ways. It's like a circuit board or
Mm-hmm.
a neural. It's a network of signals basically being sent back and forth all the time. So if we have too many personalities, as it were, or different encoders of the electrical signals, that would eventually overload if you have too many of
Yeah.
the signals going back and forth in a way. So it would fry basically.
Right. It's just like when you have a computer that's too many windows are open, it freezes.
Right.
And then you have to unplug it. But unfortunately, with human being, that usually involves death. But I want to make a distinction between mind and brain. You are a mind. Mind is pure energy, and the brain is the device that the mind uses to experience the physical reality.
Yes.
So it's two different things, but they're connected.
Yeah. And if we talk about colors and think what a color is, for instance, it basically is light fractured or split up in one frequency that is being bounced back at you. It basically is photons, right? So I mean,
exactly. It is a frequency. It's a vibration,
right,
of a particular rate that manifests in that color.
And that specific frequency then is something that if you personally are in a position where you can be healed by a certain frequency, a color obviously then would be beneficial or helpful to you. Is that correct?
Yes, because each color or frequency has a function, and if you know the proper way to create a sentence of the colors, if you will, or a combination of the colors for a particular mind pattern, yes, you can correct anything.
Very interesting. And how about the other way around? Can colors be used as even as triggers in mind control and things like this?
Oh, absolutely, and that is why in my work I list specifically colors that one should never put into a human energy field. You may see them in an energy field, but you must never put them in.
What's the difference there? How is something being put into?
Well, for example, if the color of mind control waves is a very dark yellow or mustard yellow color, so if you're working on a person or using healing energy, you must never transmit that color to the person.
Mm-hmm.
You could see this color in a person, but you must mitigate that and never enter it in.
Okay, I see. Interesting.
As an example, just like you might see a person has heavy metal toxins, but you don't put them in this.
Right, of course. Yes, I got you. Huh. Interesting. And how about this thing with archetypal images? I mean, this is powerful. We can even talk about symbol or symbolism itself. I mean, in many cases, we can see that the Illuminati, the hierarchical system that controls, money, banking, and in many cases, of course, corporate and the kind of the commerce structure, they prominently use symbols all the time. We have logos, we have heraldry. There's so many of these around. Why are a symbol or even an archetypal symbol so important to the power structure, you think?
Because they know that is part of the language of creation. And if they use a particular shape in a particular color, it will give off a vibration or a set of instructions that they want to transmit to whoever views this. And so, even the Illuminati are subject to language of hyperspace because they are, whatever they are, they're part of creation as well.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
So this can be, again, as we mentioned, it can be used both ways, but also it can, I guess, for me, in a way, what I feel right now is that a symbol per se is not evil. It's about the intent of the person who created the symbol, and foremost, if the person is not, smart enough or intelligent enough to understand what the symbol is supposed to convey, then it becomes, dangerous, or potentially not dangerous, perhaps, but potentially can influence you at that point. Would you say that's correct?
Well, the symbols themselves, like you say, they're not good or bad, they just are. And they have a particular meaning or function that is a creation of the vibration. But if a person doesn't, even if a person doesn't understand consciously the meaning of a symbol, subconsciously they do, because it's part of their makeup. It's part of the composition of existence, and so even though they may not understand the specific meaning on a visual level, they do on a subconscious level.
Right, right.
So it's really a question of how this is being transmitted. For example, I don't know if you have in Sweden, there's a department store called Target.
No, we don't have it, but I know of it, yeah.
Yes, and the symbol for the pineal gland is a royal blue circle with a royal blue dot in the middle. Well, the symbol for this Target store is a red circle with a red dot in the middle.
Right.
So they've taken the pineal gland energy, and they've taken and turned the color into anger and sexuality. So when a person sees this logo on the store, immediately they're sexually triggered, and they feel like their sexual needs can be met in this place.
Interesting.
So it's brilliant, really.
Well, of course, exactly. And I mean, at this point, we also know that in many cases, these really big corporations, they are have been investigating a lot of the background in regards to psychology on how to even market, how to make a brand powerful. We know that we're flooded all the time with so many symbols. So the market, if you will, of the corporate structure is over flooded as well. So they need something that is powerful that can breach through and penetrate through that wall of advertisements that is out there. So, for instance, we know that McDonald's, for instance, they choose a bright red background on a with the golden yellow arches, because that kind of heightens you, that makes you more stressful, but it's also a very powerful combination of colors as far as I've been able to interpret that, and it actually makes it makes manifest within your consciousness in another way. For example, a more fancy restaurant might go with more lighter colors that aren't so aggressive, if you will. And there's a fascinating kind of discovery to make in how they use and how they market with colors as well,
Absolutely, and people should note every season when the fashion comes out or whatever the popular clothing line is for that year, people should look at the colors that are being promoted, because that is a clue to the kind of programming that's being enhanced at that period of time. And we always see, especially in business, a lot of gray, navy blue colors. And gray is a symbol of confusion and doubt. And navy blue is worry about the future, aggressiveness in many different ways. And so these are the colors that are promoted in business.
That's interesting.
So that's very interesting too.
Yeah, and blue, of course, obviously, that's very prominent, as you say, in a lot of commerce and banking. And of course, I'm thinking of the relationship to the ocean and the whole maritime thing that is going on with the blue, and even the Blue Lodge of Freemasonry, right?
Yes, but remember, it's navy blue because there's many different shades, and each shade has a different meaning. For example, ice blue is a color for communication, and also can be used in healing to reduce fever and swelling and bleeding, and even blood pressure. So we must be careful with the shading when we talk about the colors, because the intensities and the shadings make very different meanings.
And would you say that there is, within one specific color, let's take blue, I mean, are there a limited number of sets within what the frequency can do with you? What I'm asking here is that if we, for example, look at a computer, a gradient of the color, we can have millions of different, frequencies, I guess, within the range of blue. Is that the same in regards to what you're talking about? Is there this much variety in every single field of each color?
Yes, there are nuances. Nuances to the meanings and refinements to the meanings depending on the intensities, yes. It gets more distinct as the shading gets distinct. So you'd have to look at the
it's very interesting. And talking of archetypal images and even colors for that matter as well. Wasn't it you who actually talked about the Teletubbies in one of your talks?
Yes.
Yeah, tell us a bit about that. That's fascinating.
Well, I usually talk about that in my language of hyperspace class because, and the DNA class, because I talk about the DNA hyperspace sentence consists of 4 symbols, each one representing one of the protein bases in the DNA sequence. And so here we have the 4 Teletubbies in 4 different colors with 4 different symbols on their head, which are archetype symbols. So in the class, they learn the meanings of various colors. They learn the various some of the symbols. I mean, there's billions of symbols. And so I say, here's the Teletubbies. What is their sentence saying from the top of their head? And the sentence comes out that they are creating robots from space, which is basically about satellite transmissions. And the other interesting thing about Teletubbies is that every now and then they'll flash on the screen this radiating sun with an infant's face in the middle. And if you know about reptilian belief system or religion, the radiant sun is one of their symbols for their god mind, and that the baby is a sacrifice for the god, the reptilian god. So the Teletubbies show is quite, in my opinion, horrific and should be taken off the air.
And I think it wasn't it? Or is it
I don't know. I have no idea. I never watched it. But
Me neither.
I don't know if it's on or not.
Incredible. It's something really, really creepy, though, about it. I have to say. I mean, I haven't seen it that many times, and as same as you, I guess, then Stewart, I rarely watch TV, but when I did and when it was on those few occasions, it was something really very kind of weird with it. It's trying to pinpoint it. What's going on here? There's something weird here. It's creepy.
That they didn't speak a distinguishable language.
Right.
And then one of them was accused of being homosexual.
Right.
If you remember that.
Right.
So they were kind of androgynous, amorphic beings who were like mindless, gibberish, which is what they want children to grow up to be.
And I've also heard that this was actually developed in relation to how kids responded to each and every scene of the program. I don't know how detailed they did this, but allegedly they brought everyone from infants up to a certain age, I guess 3 or even up to 5 or older, and then watched how the kids reacted to what was happening in the series or in the scene of the program. And then they developed the program in sequence with the kids' response to it. Have you heard about that?
Well, I'm sure that they use that to learn how to make them dumber and make them not ask questions and just go along with the flow.
Right.
Because that's what they want children to be. And it's so sad when you see what's going on in schools these days. The children really are not learning anything.
That's right.
And what they do learn is very simple, basic information, and you're not allowed to question it.
That's right. But the knowledge is out there, and as long as curiosity is around, then there is a tremendous opportunity to learn and grow. That's how I feel.
Yes, I agree. And also I find interesting, for example, the way I learned math or science is no longer taught in the school. So that even my younger children, if I look at their math homework, I can't understand it. I don't know what to do with it, and I think they did do those things on purpose so that the parents cannot help the children, and the children have to learn in this new way.
Right.
Of quite a lot of individuals who across the globe are maintaining and controlling human population.
So, as we talked about before, and as we have mentioned on this program, obviously before, is that this is I guess we could say a tiny clique of very wealthy and powerful individuals. Would you say that that's correct?
Yes, I don't know if I would use the word tiny, but it is in proportion to the global population tiny.
Right.
We're talking about, perhaps 300 to 400,000 people who are attempting to control 6.6 billion.
That's right. So it's a few controlling the many, and in that process, all different of types of technology is something that
Yeah.
they would have to use, I guess, in a way to be able to maintain their agenda and maintain their control. Is that right?
Yes, and it's very pervasive because when you're such a small group of people and you have a mind to control the rest, armies and weapons. Yes, much of my work now is, especially in the last 3 to 4 years, has been in deprogramming people because, as I may have mentioned on your show last time, the entire world now is subjected to mind control and programming, which is being broadcast from satellites that ring the Earth and are amplified by ground tower transmissions like cell towers, microwave towers, etc. And in many countries, even the electrical systems in the home are conductors for these electrical mind control waves.
Is that I've heard this about the electrical system, that this has to do with something called a Lilly wave. Have you heard about that?
Yes, and also people should know that the electrical generating stations very often, in fact, mostly they do, generate more electricity than is necessary, and then that is mixed with the ELF that for mind control, and they actually dump it into the ground. And that in the U.S., if a product has not been altered within 5 years, then they can say that it is non-GMO, even though 6 or 7 years ago it was altered.
Really?
See? Yeah, and so people are fooled. And even now, the organic stores in North America are being pushed out by the larger supermarkets, who are now having organic sections, which are much cheaper than going to the small little store. And so people go to the organic section and they buy their food, but the law states that 37% of it can be non-organic and still have an organic label. So people are fooled by all of this. And in the medicinal products that come out, they contain lead, aluminum, barium, arsenic, all kinds of poisons in the preservatives and in the medications, which then bind the heavy metals to the cellular structure, and in fact travels through the ground into the surrounding area, and just permeates homes, businesses, roads. Everything is being bombarded from the ground and from the sky.
And you mentioned a kind of a grid work of satellites. Then I guess, what kind of signal is it that is being broadcast? You mentioned cell towers. I guess that this is something that goes into the microwaves. Is that correct?
Yes, and quite brilliantly, the carrier waves mimic the pattern and intensity of human brainwave, so that the person thinks it's their own thoughts. They are not aware that it's external to them and being transmitted, because it piggybacks the brainwave, the sine wave of your own mind.
And do you know who is putting up and maintaining and are owning the grid of these satellite networks at this time?
Well, you can call it Illuminati, New World Order, global government, whatever term you want to use, but it's the group really aren't enough, because the other 6.2 billion can overwhelm that 0.4 amount very quickly. So the use of mind control is a way of creating slaves who don't know that they're slaves. And then this is enhanced and supported by media, by television broadcasts and shows that use trigger words and codes in them that will enhance the programming. News stories are only designated to what the population is supposed to know, not the entire amount of the information. And the other thing is with the food, medication, uh, the movies that are out there, most food has been genetically altered. And interestingly, people go to the store and they look for perhaps the brands that say non-GMO or not genetically altered. But the law, especially in the United States, and I can't